Well, welcome to this week's live stream. My name is Wayne Clark here from the World Class Manager team based in London. And unusually, we're getting a bit of blue sky, which is great. Great to be here for the live stream. And this is a big one. It's an important one. This week, we're talking about what we're calling Show Me the Money. And this is all about essentially filling this void and this big gap that often exists in people's knowledge. So if this is the first time you've arrived at one of our live streams, thank you very much for being here. This is a multi-platform stream that goes out on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, on a few others, and of course here on LinkedIn. So thank you very much for joining the live stream. We try and do this every 2 weeks or so in terms of the frequency, in terms of the format. This is very informal. The whole idea is that we're sharing with you insights, best practices, tools, tips, and anything else that we're learning from some of the best organizations that we're working with all around the world. If you've not met me before, my name is Wayne Clark, and I'm the very fortunate man who fronts the World Class Manager team, again, based largely out of the UK, but we've got our team spread all over the world. And our focus is on building line management capability. That's what we spend most of our time doing. We've worked now with 1,000 different organizations, more than 100,000 managers in more than 30 odd countries around the world. So lots of insights. The whole basis of this live stream is to share with you a rich set of data, insights, and best practices that we've picked up from organizations everywhere, which leads us to my first request, actually, which is to try and make this as interactive as possible. We love to get questions. We love to get challenges. One of our client directors, Ashley, is live on the line as well, so ready to pick up on any questions that come from any of the different platforms. So we'll feed those in as we go through. Some of you I know like to send them more as direct questions, in which case we'll try and answer those after the stream is ended. So again, a huge thank you for being here for those of you who've joined for the first time. And if you're a returning person to the live stream, thank you very much. As I said, my sort of number one focus, and I like to start each one of these live streams with an intent. My intent for today is about how we help to fill this void and in a way bridge the knowledge gap between a bunch of people in every organization who really understand stuff, and we've got another bunch of people who don't understand stuff. That's super high level, very generic, but it will make much more sense as we go through this. And my intent for this session is to help you to build a truly robust business case for change. As I said before in previous sessions, this is like the worst acronym in the world. BRB, CFC, build robust business cases for change. All of our work, all of our research, all of our insights, we're hoping can be used by you to help create really robust business cases for change in your organizations. Sometimes it can be difficult to argue why you should be doing something, why you should invest in something, why perhaps the manager focus needs to be a really sharp focus of a lens for the leadership population of any organization. And we're hoping that our data and our insights can help to, in a way, to enrich your conversations with leadership team members. And this session is called Show Me the Money. Roll the intro. So this week is very important because what we're looking at is how do we help to, in a way, enhance the manager's knowledge in any organization around the world, regardless of whether you are a large multinational with a few 100,000 people or whether you're super local SME with 50 people. The same issue exists in every organization. I suspect, though, the more that we're compounding out the size of the organization, often the more complex these things in a way can be. So we wanted to share some data with you. I'd say shocking data, groundbreaking data. And we are very reactionary. We like to react to what the people want. And what we found out on LinkedIn through the numerous polls that we keep running and I keep running is we found out a lot of people believe, and the number truly was shocking to me, that the managers should understand the financial position of the organization. So we're going to talk a bit about that. I've got three, what I call the 3 E's, and these are the three, I would argue, important areas of focus when it comes to the big, like all interesting stuff, Wayne, but how do we do this? Like, what's the how-to here? And we're going to get into 3 specific things that I think we can do to make a big impact on this. Now, depends how you're listening to this, and with the power of awesome graphics, depends how you're listening to this. It could be that you're listening to this from the perspective of you are a CEO or a CFO or someone who's got a vested interest with ensuring that as many people as possible across the organization do understand the financial position of the organization. So again, we're going to talk a little bit about what this means. You may be a HR director or a director of learning and development, or L&D, and your focus is how do we upskill and enhance managers' knowledge of this stuff, you may indeed be a manager and think to yourself, I really don't understand what the financial position of the organization is. In a way, why should I? And what might be in this for me? So I'd love to try and look at it from that angle. And if we can also, you may yet to become a manager. You may yet get to be, I can't find the words, you might not yet be a manager. You may have a future ambition to be a manager or leader in your organization. In which case, why would you do it? I'll give you the insight. Don't do it. Managing people is insane. But if you are still hell-bent on becoming a people manager, then hopefully this will be a real value to you, because this is something that's going to help to propel your career and also to fuel your growth through the organization and make a greater impact for your team, for the people your team serves, and of course, for the shareholders, the stakeholders of the organization too. So lots wrapped up into this. We're going to try and look at this from multi-angles. It's a multi-platform live stream, and we're going to try and attack this from a few different attack vectors as well. So it depends how you're listening to this. Could be from the sort of perspective of the organization, could be from a very personal and sort of singular lens of how you're going to drive this stuff forward and make an impact. Now, I said, we like to react to what we see on LinkedIn and what we get through the poll information that we poll consistently, regularly on LinkedIn. And this, for me, was the closest I've ever got to 100% vote on any question I've asked on LinkedIn. And the question was, managers and money, what do we think? I can then reveal what the managers say. And the question was, is it important for managers to understand the organization's finances? Is it important for managers to understand the organization's finances? 148 votes, 99% of people said yes, 1%, one person said no. It was so upsetting to me because I've never had a poll which has had 100% response on any particular response question. And I was so close. There was this one person, I'm not going to say who they were, but I'm going to find them. One person who said that it's not the case. But of course, we like a balanced vote. But this was the most imbalanced vote I've ever seen. And it pretty much we can assume here, and it's a safe statement to make, that we all agree, with a very small caveat, that we think it's important that managers do understand the organization's finances. Now, to put this in context, when we think about the finances of the organization, this is one aspect, right, of things that we would love to get into the manager's brain. So broadly, thinking about like two very different views, depending on how you're looking at the screen here, we know that execs know a bunch of stuff. Senior people know a bunch of stuff. And I'm not going to say the difference between managers and leaders. We're not going to fall into that trap because it's actually useless for this argument. We've got many, many, many leaders in organizations as clueless as the frontline managers, team leaders, and supervisors when it comes to many of these issues. So we're not trying to separate out leaders from managers. This is not a sort of typical LinkedIn post on the differences here. We're talking about often the difference between what the exec know. So whether that's your senior leadership team, your exco, your excom, your management team, whatever you term as the leadership population, the ultimate executive of the organization, they often know much more than everyone else does, especially when it comes to the role of the manager. Of course, we're biased on the manager here because our focus is called World-Class Manager, and we focus very much on the role of the manager. But we do believe that there is this big gulf, this big gap between what the execs know and what everyone else knows. And in a way, what we're trying to achieve, not just through this live stream, but much of our work actually in organizations, my day job of advising CEOs and leadership teams, is how do we try and bridge that gap or bring up the amount that managers do know to try and equal some way what the execs of the organization know. Now, why is this important? Well, if you think about it, finance is one aspect of this. Let's forget finance for a minute and talk about strategy. Is it important that we try and get as many managers as possible, as close as possible to understanding the organization in the way that the executive of the organization do? Of course it is. Let's look at customer insights, for example. Is it important that our managers in the organization, across the organization, understand what the customer says or what our clients say as close as possible to the people at the center of that content and knowledge? And that might not necessarily be the exec, but let's assume for this moment that it is. Of course it's important. Let's take employee engagement feedback. Is it important that our managers understand this stuff as well as the executive team? Because often, and I spent many years doing this, the executive team get often half a day or a day's worth of discussion, dialogue, debate, usually in a nice location, not in the office, to sit and think through and discuss what this really rich employee feedback, colleague feedback, employee experience feedback says about the organization. They get to digest it, they get to discuss it, they understand it. the rank and file of us as managers, we don't get that. We get a PowerPoint, we get a bunch of information thrown at us. It's broadcast messaging often, and often we don't understand it. So you can overlay, when we talk about show me the money, and this comes for a reason, I'm going to share with you a brief story, but it comes from looking at this as a particular issue that's not just in a way relevant to finances. This is relevant to every key discipline across the organization that we'd want to know. And again, with the power of awesome, expensive graphics, look at this. When we think about the difference between the sort of seniority of the organization, of where you are in seniority, and in terms of stuff I mean, it's pretty much like this, isn't it? The more senior you become in the organization, often the more stuff you know. Often the more junior you are in the organization, the less stuff you know. And it's like this for a reason, because no one often goes after trying to plug and solve and fill these knowledge gaps. So when we come back to this and look at this score, which was 99%, shocking to me when we looked at this, it was very clear that there is this big gulf, this big gap, this big void between what the execs know and what managers know. We believe, the public, LinkedIn, and I'm sure it would be the same if we reran this poll on any other platform, that we believe that there is a need to improve this. Now, when I said in the run up to this, if you saw any of the promotional activity, we were saying that we would reveal the shocking difference between what we said on LinkedIn and what the reality is. I'm not going to say the truth because it's not a universal truth, but the reality based on our personal experience. And our personal experience is pretty decent because we've got the insights of 15,500 managers of the 100,000 managers who've been through our World-Class Manager program. And of the 15,500 managers that we spoke to, we found out that 47% of those managers say that they understand the organization's finances. 47% say that they understand the organization's finances. Pretty much 100% of us believe that the managers should understand the organization's finances. 47% understand the organization's finances. You do the maths, there's a big gap between, in a way, what reality looks like and what we think reality perhaps should look like. So again, we're back at this really important question that we pose, is how do we fill this void? And as always, in these live streams, we like to try and zero in on some super, super practical things. So I'm hoping by this point, we're a few minutes in. How long are we in? We're 12 minutes in. I'm hoping this has started to get some things whirring in the brain and thinking about your organization. What does it look like for your average manager? I'm employed by your organization to do this role. I'm in a role of a manager, a really important role. I have an influence in terms of your culture, in terms of the employee experience, in terms of how we deliver for the customer, in terms of the impact that we make on the performance of the company. What does my world look like? How rich is my knowledge when it comes to thinking about the finances of the organization? If you're listening to this and looking at this thinking, you know what, we're actually doing really, really well, I would love to hear from you. And please do feel free to share this publicly. Again, Ashley's live on the line and we can pick up some of this as it comes through. If you're doing this in a particular way, I would love to learn, maybe in a short summary, because we can only share so much on the screen, but it'd be great to get a quick insight into how you're doing it. If, however, you're looking at this thinking we probably need to do a little bit better, what is it specifically that you might need and have a particular challenge with? And again, please feel free to share this in terms of this. Now, a brief story and a sip of coffee, because I talk a lot. A brief story here is a couple of years ago, I was very fortunate to go and interview the CFO and the CEO of this company live on stage. They'd asked me to do it. I'm not an interviewer. I'm also not a live streamer, by the way. This is not my day job, but we like to try and get our insights out on a regular basis. I was asked to go and interview the CEO and CFO of this company live on stage in front of their 300 managers. The whole thing was set up like, Wayne, we want you to come and interview them and make it like a sort of nice, just relaxed chat. I don't know about you, but if you're sitting there talking to two people in front of 300 other people, it's not for me a relaxed chat, because you sort of look right and you can see 300 people, but we're sitting there talking about stuff. And as I get onto the stage, the CFO says to me, Wayne, I want you to ask me anything that you want, because I don't want you to look like a stooge of management. So, I thought, oh, this is fantastic. I can ask anything. And he said, yeah, ask anything you want. Make it totally natural. So I said, oh, great. So we get up on stage and they unveil the profit figures, which were stunning, right? The crowd get carried away, clapping in amazement at the profit numbers, which were quite amazing. I get carried away as well. I'm on stage clapping too. I don't know why I'm clapping, but I'm clapping anyway. And then I thought to myself, as I'm clapping, why am I clapping? Hold on. I said, look, I've been to, and this was the CFO. I said, look, I've been to one of your contact centers and spoke to some of the staff there. They've told me that they're going to get a 1% pay rise, right? And I said, look, I'm no genius, but I can divide that big number on the screen by the number of people who work for the company. And that's way more than 1% pay rise. It should be based on how much money you've made. So where's all the money gone? And he sort of looked at me and as if to say, like, what the hell are you talking about? What are you doing? And I sort of, well, you asked me to ask anything. This could be a career limiting move, let me tell you. But he did a good job, and he responded very well and said, well, we've invested X amount of millions into our IT infrastructure. We've invested all this money into building and improving our products and services. We've invested all this money into technology, blah, 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 blah. And he explained the money away, and it absolutely made sense. And what we did is I turned to the managers and I said to the managers, when you go back to your teams and explain the profit number, what you have to do is include this story that your CFO has just shared with you. And that story should take you about 10 to 15 seconds to explain, pretty much the same amount of time I just explained it to you. So the idea is that if in the absence of this story, what happens? We know that the managers go back to their teams. They don't go to their teams and say, we made a lot of money this year, guys. I know we've not been paid much, but I suspect that we've probably invested for the future growth of the organization. Yeah, that's probably what we've done. We've probably put 5 million quid into our IT services. We've probably put 3 million quid into improve our product and market position and marketing. Yeah, that's what we've probably done, which is why you've only been paid 1% more. That makes sense, right? This is exactly what managers don't do. Right? What happens is, we know, as you've probably experienced, as I've experienced, is you see this headline figure, and now what we've done as an organization is put the manager in a tremendously difficult position, armed with zero knowledge, to go back to the team and have this conversation. The easiest thing to do in conversation with the team is say to the team, look guys, I know it's 1% pay rise this year, but I'll tell you what, if it was my money, I'd pay you much more than that, but it's not. And then all the team agree, everyone cheers and says, yes, we don't like the leadership team because they're horrible. And what they've done is they've taken all of this money and they've obviously spent it on themselves, and we've been in a way overlooked. And we feel really bad about that. This is never a great situation to be in. And what conclusion can the managers draw if they're not armed with the information? Often there is this natural void. So what do we fill the void with? Often we don't fill the void with a positive story, because it's kind of not how we're wired, right? For survival, that's another conversation. But we fill the story, or we fill the void, with often a fear-based or a negative-based story, which becomes truth in the team, and it's compounded because no one ever really challenges that. The managers are never armed with the ability to have a type of conversation that you would get as if you sat down with the CFO one-to-one and talk about this, which is why we, in a way, make a plea to the CFO, to the financial directors, to the financial controllers out there who do understand the money. How do we make it possible for all of our managers, and explain it to us like, in a way, we're fifth graders, not because we're stupid, but because we're busy and because we need to try and understand this stuff quickly because we've got lots of other commitments, so that I can turn that into something knowledge-based and relevant for my team to engage with on a regular basis. So when we look at this story, I mean, this was something that really made me think, after I'd experienced this is something that every organization deals with to some degree. And like I say, it might be related to finance, it might be related to strategy, to engagement, to customer feedback, something else. So 3 key things that we want to focus on in terms of like the how-to. All interesting stuff, Wayne. So what can we do with it? The first step, and you probably expect us as an organization like we are to talk about this, use this word when we talk about educate. And it really is. This is not necessarily about building skills so much. I think from a starting position, this is about how do we educate our managers to understand some of the essentials when it comes to the finances of the organization. There's a clip that does the rounds on social media, and I've seen it. It's an interview with Sir Richard Branson. And they ask him about, that someone's asking him, as he's become already very successful in running his business, how much does he understand about what a balance sheet is and profit and loss statement and all of those things running a company? And he kind of says he doesn't really understand it, doesn't know it. And no one's ever really sort of explained it to him, or perhaps he's never taken the time to understand it. And we're not saying that this should be the case, but we found that there are many, many senior leaders who don't understand these essentials when it comes to the numbers. The reason why it is important is because it helps us to, in a way, translate all of this key information to something relevant for the team. It's the ultimate in the what's in it for me factor. And it can help in very difficult times when we're having to make difficult decisions as an organization about budgeting, about cost cutting, about reapportioning resources, of which, of course, if we're a CEO, we need our managers to be on side with us. How can they be on side when they just don't understand the information and therefore fill in the blanks with stuff that they just make up? And often we do, because it's what we do as human beings. So one of the key things that we look at here is how do we improve, in a way, the education level? And a couple of things to think about here. I'm going to sort of take us through this step by step. When we think about this, let's start with something as like the organization. So let's use finance as the lens here. Of course, we're talking about show me the money. When we think about the finances of the organization, what are some of the key metrics that the organization is concerned with? If you're a stock market listed company, and even if you're not, this is a really good discipline, I think, is listen in to the analyst calls every 3 months. We work with a number of listed companies. And the fascinating thing is, if you look at some of the big companies that are listed on the stock exchange, is every 3 months, their financial analysts and their investors absolutely tear them apart and beat them up every 90 days on a public call for all the investors to dial into. The interesting thing is, many of the organizations we work with who are listed, as you can imagine, the CEOs and the CFOs and all of their teams spend a ton of time preparing for those presentations and for those analyst calls, because they're brutal if you ever listen to any of them. What then happens is they've spent a lot of time and energy engaging the public and the investors about some of these key metrics. And they've done the hard work, which is getting the information together. And then what often happens is that stuff isn't then relayed internally. So if you think about what some of those key measures might be on those external analyst calls, headline profit numbers, cost figures, projections, budget numbers, all of those things that as an investor, you're probably going to be interested in, is relevant information to get into. Right. Then if you think, okay, that's kind of like the big stuff. That's the big overarching, what does this mean for, as I put it here, what does this mean for the organization? In a way, you could then ask like a so what question. All very interesting, but so what? What does that mean to us as a team? So we might be in, in HR, we might be in marketing, we might be in operations, we might be in customer delivery, we might be a market analyst. Depends what our role is and our department is. What does all of this mean to us? Also, the same applies in the public sector. We could be in NHS trust, we could be in education, we could be in energy. Doesn't matter. Always has the same impact and the same connection. What do these headline figures mean, and why are they so important that we're talking about them with our key stakeholders, be those external investors or key sort of government, or what's the other word? You could look at like a regulatory stakeholder, could be exactly the same situation. There are some key headline info and key data that's important for those stakeholders. So what? What does all of that mean to us, to our team, to our department? And then the final so what question is, what does all of that mean to me? And this is like an unbelievably simple structure to talk this through. Important to talk it through with yourself, because it's important that we understand this. Really important to talk it through with someone else. And I think if we can help our managers to sit and think through, then it's such a very simple structure. What do these headline figures mean? What does it mean for the team? What does it mean for me personally? Is a really valuable way to do it. How long should it take? It should probably take you anywhere between 30 to 60 minutes maximum. Again, being sympathetic to the time challenges that managers have, right? No one's got time. People's attention spans are always shot to death. So we have to make this quick and simple, which is why I said, if you are in finance, help us to understand this like you would explain it to a 5th, 6th grader, because it's important, because we don't have time to really engage, but it's important that we do understand the information. So again, what does it mean for the organization? What does it mean for the team? And what does this mean for me personally? The second big thing here, where we talk about, I guess, engage, if I can find the slide here, can't even find it. There we go. Doesn't matter. The second big thing is to talk about what it means where we engage with the managers. And when I say this, it's about how do we do it, right? So we've educated, we could find a mechanism to educate managers around this key information. The engagement part of this is, again, a regular dialogue that we would hope to have with managers about why this stuff is important. And it leads me to the final point, which is around how do we then evaluate this? The reason why I think the evaluation part is so key is because if you are an organization of any significant size, and I would even say a significant size is like 100 people plus, but because you've got a management population who are playing a key proactive role in driving everything in terms of the operation, customer insight delivery, in terms of employee feedback, they're responsible for creating great employee experiences, all the things that you would want the managers to do that play a disproportionately influential role in relation to the people in their teams, then the evaluation is key, because managers can give us this insight that in a way no one else can. And final stat I'd love to sort of talk about and I've talked about this on previous live streams, but I think it relates really well to this, especially when we talk about Show Me the Money, is we found out in our research, again, of the 15,500 managers who we've got data on, of the 100,000 who've been through our program, we asked the managers what percentage of managers believe that the products or services of their organization could be better. Overwhelmingly, 81% of managers said that the products or services of their organization, in their opinion, could be better. Now, this was mind-blowing for us because, in the world of looking at employee experience feedback, colleague feedback, lots of people say that we should improve various things. Hardly do we find feedback on things like the operation, where it comes to things that we should be able to do to improve the operation. In the quantitative feedback. In the qualitative feedback, it's there in abundance, but often leadership teams don't read this stuff because there's just too much of it. And to try and aggregate it and to theme it requires a ton of work. Some organizations are great at doing it, but in the main, on the whole, based on everything we've seen of 1,000 organizations we've worked with, I would say this is the organizations in the minority. So when we looked at this, 81% of managers believe that the products or services of the organization could be better. They've got a very strong opinion on how things could be improved. The challenge is often that there isn't a mechanism in which to engage with the managers on a regular basis and collect those organizational, operational insights. Having an evaluation process in place, which is in a way headlined by looking at the finances of the company and what managers might think, is an awesome way in to try and uncover all sorts of other insights. So I would advise on a regular basis, maybe on a quarterly basis, just like we do with the external analysts, why don't we engage with the management population to some degree? Again, you may have 10,000 managers in your organization. You could take a subset of managers who would be interested to engage with you on such a topic and talk with managers every 3 months about the finances of the organization. What do they understand of it? What's our financial position? We can educate managers this way as well, but it also prompts a really, really, rich debate about where we're at and also some of those insights that can improve the operation of the organization too. So a super fast, in a way, run through a number of very, very important topics. And I think when we come back to this topic of how do we improve, in a way, the throughput of information, how do we make sure, I'm trying to find my earlier awesomely stunning graphical graph here, of how do we make sure that as we go through the career journey, so that we don't have to wait until we are senior to when we understand this information. Maybe in the past, I don't know, knowledge was power, and we sort of had this overhang in terms of what you should know at various levels of seniority in the organization. Of course, that's all changed. Everything's different. We can tear up all of that stuff. Why couldn't it be that as a new graduate, as someone coming into the organization, I could be contextually as rich as the senior leadership of the organization too? Is that a valuable thing to do? Of course it is, because it means that we make smarter decisions on a regular basis. I'm going to quote here The Art of Smart, which is by some brilliant work that an organization called Crow, which are one of the world's largest accounting networks, have done. And their focus on what they call the art of smart is about smart decision making. And again, I would argue that this is one of the cleverest things to do in a way, is to make sure, and they talk about being bold, is to be bold and to make sure that as many people in the organization as possible are as close as possible to understanding the organization as the CEO, as the director general, as the secretary general, or whoever it is who leads the organization out there, which I think is such an important thing. So we're going to pause there for a minute. Hopefully this has spurred some thoughts and some questions. If there are any questions that come in, then please do shout out. It seems one is coming in. I also get to read the question at the same time that you do. I've got no other aids available here. It's a low-tech operation. So let's see how this goes. So this is from Sunil. Hi, Wayne. Are you going to remind us of the 3 E's? Yes, I will remind you of the 3 E's. The 3 E's are, in terms of the first one, it's a good test of my memory. First one is educate. We've got to make sure that we educate managers about what is important and what they should know. Second thing is, how do we engage? So on what basis do we engage? How do we do that? It's one thing having a bunch of information, but often that information can be stale, it can be boring. The way that we engage people with it is key. We had a CEO once, actually I'll pause that story, and the third E is about how do we then evaluate on a regular basis. The story I was just going to tell was we had a CEO once of an organization who is a really nice guy, and I've got a lot of respect for him. However, when it came to engaging the organization with the numbers, I mean, it was so boring. And I asked him to explain to me the next 2 to 3 years of the organization's evolution. And he looked at me and sort of looked at the floor, looked at me, looked at the floor. I look at him and look at the floor. And he says, if we could do market growth plus 3%, I think that would be really exciting for everyone. And I'm bored. He looks bored. We're both bored. And I said to him, that's boring. I mean, the thing is, we're in a world where he is competing for the attention with lots of other people not just in the organization, but outside the organization. And here is what we would hope to be a compelling, exciting message about where we're trying to get to as an organization. Market growth plus 3% is boring as, right? So the facts are right. Of course, that is the fact, but there is a much richer story to this. I'm sure that there's a richer story from the investor's position. There's a richer story about what that means if we did achieve that 3%. What does that mean in terms of the organization? What does it mean in terms of the investments we can make into people's growth and development? What does it mean in terms of the interactions that we're going to deliver for our customers, and so on and so on? There's a really rich tapestry and a story here to bring to life, but often it's done in an unengaging way. So that's why I say engaging is a key area to look at. So thank you very much, Sunil. Another question coming in as well. This is great. So once one has acquired knowledge, how does one share it to be inclusive without being a tad smug? Well, this goes back to the whole thing of knowledge is power, and probably where we get into something to do with the culture of the organization too. If we go back maybe one or two live streams a few weeks ago, I'm not sure, one we did was focused on culture change. And a key area of building a great culture, of course, is an organization in which where people want to share this type of information so that they don't have a more powerful position. Because in theory, we should be all achieving the same thing here. And I think this is such an important thing. And again, maybe where we need to make sure that we either re-educate, or even in some cases, I would argue it's a powerful thing to re-induct managers. Just to pause on this for a second. We met an organization who are, they're huge actually. I won't share who they are because it's a bit unfair, but they're huge. And one of the things that they did is they implemented a reinduction. So every 2 years, every employee of the organization and every external contractor, of which my organization is one, have to sit through a reinduction. And what they do during the reinduction is, in a way, they get everybody back on the same page again about what's important culturally. I think it's such a fantastic thing to do. It's not something that needs to be expensive, not something that needs to be difficult or cumbersome to implement. It can be done virtually. But imagine, in a way, on a regular basis, getting everyone back on the same page. One of those things could be around how we make sure that knowledge and this type of info is shared with everyone in the organization. Great set of questions. Another question coming in. This is great. So from Ellen, do you have any methods that work in terms of engagement? Well, if you've got about 5 hours, Ellen, let's lock in. Let's get some lunch. Let's do this. No, in terms of, yes, we've got many things. You can check out our website, worldclassmanager.com. And if you're not already following myself or the team on LinkedIn, we share loads of stuff on a regular basis, as well as every 2 weeks we do these live streams. I mean, in terms of engagement, if I was to give you like a super short sort of overview of what I would focus on, there are sort of 2 or 3 key things to focus on when it comes to driving engagement. Number one, I would argue, is that we've got to try and get as many people as possible on the same page about what we're trying to achieve. There was a guy called Colonel Ed Guthrie from the US military. We quoted him a few live streams ago, and he does this thing called the after action review process, which revolves around 4 questions. He asks after every single mission, what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, why was there a difference in between the two, and what can we do differently next time? 4 very simple questions. The first question is what was supposed to happen, is the hardest thing to agree on. Why are we here? What are we trying to achieve together? So the first point with engagement is get everyone on the same page. Second thing I would argue is that when we look at the quality of management, and of course we're biased towards this, but we believe that the managers drive much of the engagement feel in the organization. And often managers are ill-equipped and not prepared for the challenges of being a manager. So again, my experience, I was promoted on a Friday, given a bottle of champagne by my boss, and then as of Monday, I'm a manager again. Fantastic. Not fantastic, because I have no idea what I'm doing. And like many managers, you figure it out as you go along. So I think the manager role is also key. So I guess that brings us pretty much to the end of this live stream. Thank you so much for being here as part of this. Again, one of the things I like to do is share as much insight as possible. We try and come up with relevant things on a regular basis that will be of value to you as well. So a huge thank you to everyone connecting in on various platforms. We love the interaction, love the engagement, and we look forward to the next live stream. It's going to be in 2 weeks' time, and we'll share with you on LinkedIn and on other platforms what the theme of that will be. Have an awesome rest of the week. If you're in London enjoying some sunshine today, enjoy it. If you're not, hope everything is great where you are too. Again, thank you for engaging, and we will see you again on the next live stream. Bye-bye.